Yes, I'm going.
Okay. Okay. This is Poppy. Say hi, Poppy.
Hi, how are you?
And this is Grandma. Say hi, Grandma.
Hi.
Okay. So, who immigrated to America?
My father and my mother and my sister, who was only 6 months old, and my mother was pregnant with my brother. She was about five months.
Wait, which sister was it? Did you say?
My sister Claire.
You had a lot of sisters.
I have 5 sisters and a brother.
Yeah. Okay. And where did they immigrate from?
They immigrated from the town, the province of Bari, which is on the Adriatic Sea, close to Yugoslavia. And they were born in my father was born in a city called Mofeta. And my mother was born in a city called Trani, and it's only about 15 minutes away. My father was 8 years old when his family decided to move to Trani. So that's where he met my mother. And my mother and he were married when she was 18, and they decided to come to America.
So, why did they decide to come to America?
Well, because of opportunities would be better in America. In 1918 is the year they came to America.
They came to Ellis Island, right?
Excuse me?
Ellis Island, right?
Oh, they immigrated to Ellis Island, where they were examined and spoken to, but then they came to Hoboken, New Jersey, and that's where Frank Sinatra was born.
Okay. How old were they when they left?
My mother was 18, and my father was 22.
Do we still have family in Italy?
Oh yes, I
have a lot
have
of
lots
them.
of cousins in Italy, and they most of them went up to Milano to live because it was World War II, and they were being bombed in Trani, and they thought it would be best, and they walked most of the way because they were not wealthy.
A lot of walking.
A lot of walking.
What were the conditions in the country when they left?
Well, they were poor people. My mother's family was about, I think she was the youngest of 8, and they had chickens, and they sold eggs. My grandfather would have all his daughters put eggs in a basket and walk around and to sell the eggs. My father was a little, not to say wealthy, but he had a little more money, their family, and his sister was a school teacher. Although he never went to school, she tutored him. So he read and wrote in Italian, and he also spoke his dialect. Whereas my mother's family, none of the children were able to go to school because they were too poor.
Okay. What changes in their lifestyle? What changed in their lifestyle when they came to America? How is it different from in Italy?
Well, they were very lonely. My father's sister sent them as much money as she could. She was in America with her husband and her son. And when they came to America, my mother was pregnant and had a 6-month-old child, like I told you. And it was very difficult for them, and they had no furniture. They sat on boxes, and they used a box for a table. And my aunt literally helped them out as much as she could with food. And my father went around looking for small jobs, painting, or any kind of job he could get. And they would go so far as trying to set up some furniture, and as they would, they even buy maybe 2 spoons at a time or 2 forks. They were very poor. And they managed to do pretty well. Of course, they raised 7 children in America, and 6 of them during the Depression. I was born in 1933, right after the Depression, and I had it the easiest. I was the only one that had a Christmas tree or parties or any gifts. None of my sisters nor my brother ever had a Christmas tree. I got one when I was 7.
How do you think your family was treated once they arrived in America? Like outside?
There was some prejudice against the Italians at that time. It was mostly in their hometown. Hoboken was mostly German and Irish people who immigrated, and the Italians were looked down upon for many, many years. But eventually, the Italians took over almost the whole city of Hoboken.
It's all Italians now, right?
Not now.
No.
At that time was all Italian after about 15 years that they were here. Then it became very yuppie town with people from New York City moving into Hoboken, and where we would rent a room, an apartment for $18 a month. By the time the Italians were established, and these people that had more money and they built buildings, they were paying $1,800 a month. Same apartments, except that they had heat. Where we didn't have heat, we did have heat, but it was coal burning, and we had an ice box versus a refrigerator, where a man would bring ice every morning to the house, and they put it in it. Looked like a refrigerator, but it was an ice box, and that's where we kept our food cold.
So were like the conditions from living in Italy and living in America different? Like it was better here?
Yes, it was much better here, because in Italy, they had no money. They only had the money that they got from selling eggs, and they lived in poverty. Mm-hmm. But they had a wonderful childhood, and they were very close to each other, all the sisters and brothers.
So they were happy with their decision to...
Well, they were the only ones that came, and my mother missed her family very, very much. But my father at least had her sister, and eventually he found a job as a longshoreman in Hoboken and was able to save enough money to have his younger brother come to live in America, and he too worked as a longshoreman in Hoboken. In fact, they filmed on the waterfront with Marlon Brando in the same spots that my father and my uncle used to work in.
Who's that?
Marlon Brando.
I don't know who that is.
Marlon Brando was a famous actor who's now deceased. I think he is deceased. He played the head in The Godfather, the lead part in The Godfather movie sequel.
Anything to add, Grandma?
Well, my parents were born in the United States, so my grandparents came from Italy. On my father's side, they came from Sicily, and on my mother's side...
We are from Sicily, I thought so. Okay.
And on my mother's side, they're from Naples. But they actually were born here, and they were not wealthy either, they were poor. And when my mother was only 7 years old, her mother and father died. So they were taken care of by an aunt who took in all of the 7 children. And they grew up in Hoboken. And on my father's side, they also grew up in Hoboken. So I don't have the same type of story that Pop just told, because they were actually born here.
So okay, let's go now. Okay, so how did they immigrate here? Did they come over like on a boat?
They came over in a boat, but they were the lowest class, in the lower class on the bottom of the ship, and it was very rough, especially for my mother who was pregnant and had a 6-month-old baby, and they were in crowded areas.
Who did they leave behind in Italy?
Their whole entire family, their mothers, their fathers, their brothers, sisters, nieces, and nephews. It was very, very difficult for my mother, but my father was stronger than she because he had his sister and her husband to fall upon.
Why did they choose the United States and not another country?
Because the United States was prosperous at that time. There was jobs to be had, and in Italy there was hardly any work.
So, what were their hopes for coming over to America?
Well, their hope was to have a wonderful family, and which they did because they had the 7 children. And Mom never worked. She was a full-time housekeeper for her children. I said she doesn't work, but she did the hardest work. My father worked as a longshoreman, as I said before, and little by little they were able to raise 7 children. All of us went to school, and we got good educations, and we all had married, every one of us except my one sister, who is still alive. She's single. She's going to be 83.
So, if you were living in Italy at the time, would you have immigrated here?
I can't say because I've been to Italy several times, and I'd love to migrate to Italy. It's so beautiful. My favorite town is Florence, Italy. And all of the towns that I visited was just super. I would love to live in Italy.
I don't have any more questions. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Love you.
Love you too.